Our first major assignment in here is going to be a retouching project. So for those of you who just took my class, you should be real pros at this. I'll expect greatness from you at the end of the first week. But I've got a old sample image here. This is also included in your folders. It's got a lot of damage on it, scratches and things. So I'm just going to walk you through a variety of ways to clean it up and to make it look better, or adjust values and things too, and even reshape the guy's face a little bit. A lot of times when you have an old image like that, there's a little bit of noticeable grain to it. You can see some here in the background. You can see some on his cheek. So what I like to use is one of the blur filters. Now, it's under filter blur, and there's lots of different blurs. You know, some of them will affect the whole image at once. This is what Gaussian blur does. Takes all the pixels and just kind of slightly blurs them depending on what radius I set and how severe I tell it to be. This doesn't need much blur because it's low res and kind of grainy, but not as grainy as it could be. You know, the higher the grain, the more the blur you need to straighten it out. But the blurrier it gets, the more detail you lose. So Gaussian blur just kind of blurs it. You can see it before and after. If you look maybe at some of the grain here around his cheek, you can see it change as I'm flipping this back and forth. If you don't like the way Gaussian blur is working, you can try some of the other ones. You know, surface blur is a little bit more noticeable and tries to maintain some detail. If you go too high with it, though, it starts looking kind of painterly and fake. So I'm going to leave this pretty low, like on about 1 even. Threshold fairly low too. Hit OK. You can see before and after. You notice his eye gets a little too blurry. And I'm going to try one more in there just to show you. It's called Smart Blur. Again, this one tries to maintain detail while it's blurring out the texture that might be present. I'm going to increase the radius some. You don't have to use this much. Increase the threshold. Controls how many pixels it actually affects. Hit OK. And it tries to maintain detail. You can see around his lips. There's before and after. That did a pretty good job of getting rid of the grain. Okay. Then once you get kind of the grain taken out, you might need to come back in and touch up the edges. You may need to actually sharpen it. So there's a variety of sharpen filters too. It's called Smart Sharpens is a pretty interesting one. There's Unsharp Mask. I'll start with Unsharp Mask, and you can see what this does. It tries to take the edges that are there and redefine them. So the higher the amount, the sharper it'll become. If you go too high, it can look overly pixelated. I'm going to put it at about 80, 75, 80, somewhere there. And if you look, let's say pick out a spot like on his eye right here. Before, see, it was a little bit blurry right around his eye. After, sharpened it slightly up. So we were able to take the grain out, some of the grain out by blurring it, and then resharpening it a little bit with Unsharp Mask. The other one I like in here, underneath Sharpen, is called Smart Sharpen. And this lets me control a little bit more than just Unsharp Mask does. Again, I can affect the amount, just like we were doing with Unsharp Mask. I can affect the radius on it. But I can also tell it what type of blur to use. So really that's the difference. It's taking Gaussian blur and kind of combining it with a sharpening tool. So it kind of does two things at once. I kind of like that before and after the Smart Sharpen. Look how much nicer that looks. Okay. Next we're going to move into the healing brush and to the rubber stamp. And these are cloning tools to start helping us get rid of all these pieces and these white places and all these rips and cuts. But I want you guys to remember the blurring and sharpening from the menu. And there are also blur and sharpening tools over here in our toolbox that work off of a paintbrush. And here they are. The blur tool looks like a big eyedropper, or water drop, sorry. And the sharpen tool looks like a triangle. And basically you take the blur tool, it works off of brush size. You can hit your bracket keys to make your brush larger. And you can like physically blur areas that you paint upon. You can adjust the strength of this. I'm going to leave it at about 50%. I could even put it higher if you wanted it to look stronger. You can make a hard edge or soft edge brush, but you can take areas and try to blur them out. And I hold the mouse down and look, I'm literally blurring his eyes out with the blur tool. It's really noticeable, not really appropriate in this case, but you need to be aware of it because there's times when you need to just paint in a blur. And sharpen works the same way. If you had, let's say, blurred your image a little bit too much, I'm going to do a Gaussian blur again just to show you. Say put 0.4 in there. But then and you liked what it did to the cheeks, but you wanted to sharpen up the eyes just a little bit. Well, theoretically, you could take that sharpen tool here, come into this eye, and just kind of hold it down over that a little bit. And there's before. Look at this eye and after, before and after. So it lets you kind of spot sharpen areas. Just tap in a little bit of sharpness around his mouth, around his nose, maybe on his ear. Again, if you overdo it, you will over sharpen it and bring out pixels that weren't noticeable before. But they both work on brush size, and they both can be controlled with the strength value at the top and hard or soft brush here. So that's blurring and sharpening.